In this video I'm going to show you how you can pot on tomatoes to ensure they keep growing even when it's cold outside on your windowsill or in your greenhouse, to make sure that when the weather is warmer that they're ready to go on and grow out and then give you a good crop of tomatoes in the summer. Potting on tomatoes is one of those jobs that's quite essential for tomatoes because you can't keep them in their pot for too long because obviously it'll stop them growing if they're root bound. Now mine aren't actually completely root bound yet, but a lot of them, there's 2 in each module, so I want to try and make sure that they've all got their own pot to grow on in. And then, yeah, so that's basically what I'm going to try and do. And the main thing with potting on is that you need to not go from a tiny pot to a huge pot. You need to make sure you go from maybe a small pot to a medium pot and then a large pot. So you need to incrementally increase the size of the pots, because from my experience, if you put it straight from a small one into a huge pot, it can get a bit shocked and it doesn't grow as well. Whereas if you gradually increase the size of the tomato plant, I find that it does better. So today's video is going to be split into some parts. The first one being what you need to pot tomatoes on. Second one then being how to actually pot tomatoes on. So I hope you enjoy the video, but before we get started, please go down below and hit the subscribe button. Now enjoy the video. So what are you actually going to need to pot on your tomatoes? So obviously it comes in the name, you're going to need some pots. I've got these because mine are currently in 6 module trays. So I'll need these bigger pots just for one plant in each pot, and that should give them enough chance to grow on, and then I'll pop them into a bigger one again in a few weeks. You'll also need some compost. I think my pots just fell over. You'll also need some compost. I use peat-free because that's basically the best one for the environment, and I find this one to be really good, which is Merlin's Magic. And then you'll also obviously need your tomato plants, and I've got 4 varieties here. And if you haven't already watched my sowing video, then make sure you click up here to make sure that you know how to actually sow the tomatoes if you haven't yet, because there's still time to do it. And then once you've watched that and once your tomatoes have germinated, then you can go on to this potting on video. You'll also need some labels, which is probably the biggest thing that I always forget. As my family will be able to tell me, I always forget to label things. So I've also got labels here. So I'm going to start by putting some compost into my tray, and I think I'll probably need another bag of compost after this, but I'll give it a go with what I've got in here for now. That should be more than enough just for me to get started with a few pots. So I'll push that to the back. And this part, by the way, is now how to pot on the tomatoes. So actually, I brought out some gardening gloves with me, so I'm actually going to take these off my belt and I'm going to put them on, because I completely forgot that I had them with me. Okay, there we go. So I've got the compost here now in the bag. If you can hear crunching, by the way, that's just Alf eating some charcoal from the bed. Yeah, so I've got this peat-free compost here now. And what you need to do to start off is you get your pot. These are all different sizes, so I'm just going to go with what I've got. Make sure you break up any clumps that you've got in the compost so that the roots find it easier. And then you put, maybe that's a bit too much, you put a bit at the bottom and just tap it down. And then I've done probably about 1 inch or 2 here. And then what you do is you get your tomato plants. So I took the labels out of the module tray now, and I'm going to take the plants out, but remember to grab them, for that exact reason, by the leaf, because otherwise if you snap a stem, the plant's dead. If you pull it by the leaf and the leaf breaks, then it'll grow back. So I've got them out. They haven't actually got huge roots at the moment, but I just thought they might benefit them going into a new pot. So there we are. I've got 1 plant out, and this is Tigrella, this variety. So I'll put that in there. And the other thing, if your tomatoes have been leggy, in other words they've stretched to go and see the sun, then what you can actually do is you can essentially just plant them a bit lower, because every hair on the stem of a tomato is a potential root. So if you plant it a bit deeper, it won't detriment the plant at all. It'll probably just give it stronger roots, to be honest. It's pretty better. So then you just put some compost in, and wiggle it around to make sure that there's not too many air gaps in the roots. Because if there's air gaps in the roots, this will let the roots start to rot as well if it was wet. You're just gently firming it down with your fingers then. So that's one successfully done, and I'm just going to remember to put the label in it so that I actually know what it is. And then I can just put that back into the tray. So I've got another one here now, which is actually one that was growing in the same module as the last one. So now let's sort that second one out. So I'm going to keep 3 plants for each variety, because I don't really want to have too many tomato plants, but what I might do is keep some of them and offer them to some neighbours or something. Again, I'm just gently patting this down now. And potting on is a really important job, especially if you've grown them in seed trays, like ones where they're all in the same compartment, because you need to prick your tomato plants out then, because otherwise then they'll compete with each other, and then you may end up with some plants stronger than others. So you need them all to be ideally in a similar sized pot, a bit like that, so that they don't get any more advantage than each other. And if there's 2 together, I'm simply rubbing some of the compost away gently, and then they just sort of naturally separate basically. So I'm going to put that up there actually for now. I'll keep that plant there. And if you've put too much compost in there first before you put the plant in, then don't hesitate. You don't have to like tip it all out. You just run your finger in there and do a little divot in the middle, and then you just put the roots into that. There we are, we'll just put another label in there. And these labels as well, by the way, are made out of an old milk carton or milk bottle. So you don't actually have to buy labels. I have some bought labels, but if you're making lots of them and you want to save money, then you just cut a strip out of milk carton, be careful of sharp edges, and get a permanent marker pen and just write on that. So that's Tigrella finished now, and now I'm going to move on to the other varieties, but I'm unlikely to show you all of them because it'll be a bit pointless really, me showing you every single one because they're all very similar. But make sure that if you do have any questions, you leave them down below. So I finished potting on all of my tomatoes now. What I did as well was I put them in these cardboard pots if they were spare, so I can put them, well, I can ask around neighbours, friends, whatever, whether they want any tomato plants. But what I've done with them at the moment though, as well, is I've put them on top of the other pots so that I know which are which, because I haven't got labels ready for them yet. Some of them have started to wilt, so that's the next thing that you need to do when you've repotted your tomatoes, is that you need to give them water, because they will wilt, because obviously a lot of their roots, or some of their roots, will be lost. So now that they've had all of their water, or they've had their sprinkling of water, they should start to perk up now, all the ones that have wilted. But now I'm going to speak to you about everything that you need to know to care for these tomatoes until their next part of their stage of their growth and their life. So these tomatoes actually won't need a huge amount more effort now. Now that they're seedlings, that's most of the work done. They've germinated and everything like that. That's the thing that uses a lot of energy. So what they need is they just need to keep watered as they were before. And then once you start to see roots at the bottom of those pots, then we'll need to pot them onto a slightly bigger pot. And then after that, you'll need to decide whether you're going to grow your tomatoes in the ground, in a greenhouse or outdoors or whatever, depending on what variety you've grown, or you can decide whether you're going to grow it in a pot. I personally am doing basically meat in the middle, because what I'm going to do is we've got a lot of broken pots hanging around. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut the bottom off and I'm going to sink them into the ground a bit, so the tomatoes, and then fill that pot with a bit of compost, so the tomatoes have access to the compost in the pot and all of the soil below. And I've seen people do this in the soil with those bags that you get to put in grow bags, like the ones you buy from the shop. But what I'm going to do is I've thought, why not use some broken pots, use them up. And I also knew someone else who did that last year, and they said it worked quite well. So that's what I'm going to try and do in the greenhouse behind my camera, which is the tallest one I've got. And then the cherry tomatoes are going to go over there in that harvest greenhouse, because that's shorter. And I also want to put my peppers in there this year, so I don't want any huge tomato plants. I want peppers, and I'm going to have some aubergines, cucumbers, things like that in there. So I don't want it all taken up with tomato plants. So that's why I'm using this greenhouse. And also, this greenhouse, if you follow me on Instagram, you'll also know that this greenhouse, my homemade one, has actually got a new roof, which is glass, because we got some old glass that wasn't being used. So we've put it on top, and we've used some like silicone around it to seal it in. And it's actually so much lighter in there, and it gets so much warmer when it's sunny. But anyway, I think that's all I've got for today. If you have any more questions, then feel free to leave them down in the comment section below, and I'll be happy to answer them. But until the next tomato video, enjoy all of my other videos, and please make sure you go down below, hit the subscribe button, and like the video. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.